Council members acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional custodians of the land and waters, the Nurrungeri people whose ancestral lands are on which we meet today. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of Aboriginal people to country and pay our respects to elders past and present. We also extend that respect to all First Nations people. Thank you, councillors. Number 1 on the agenda is apologies. We have none. Number 2, to the best of my knowledge, acknowledgements. We have any councillors, anyone? And I would signal that probably in acknowledgements be good to talk to the CEO and myself prior if you did have one. We can sort of firm up a direction there if we can, please. Item 2, confirmation of minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 19th of January 2021. So I move that way, please. Councillor Bland moves. Councillor Roundtree seconds. All in favour, please. Carried unanimously. Any discussion around anything in that? Being none, we'll move on. Item 3, adjourned business. There is nil. Item 4, minute action list, councillors. Item 4. Don't rush me. Councillor Ling.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 05A of 19 February, Narung Reserve and Canalpin Caravan Park payment system. Just wondering how that's progressing, what's happening there.
So we
ongoing.
We haven't progressed anything as yet. That will be done just in the next, as I think I've said on a couple of occasions. Once we've done the refurbishment at the Canalpin Hall, we'll then Canalpin Hall at the pool. We'll also then look at what the options are for those games. High on the priority, it is part of it, but it's not high on the priority of what we need to do.
Councillor, I've had the discussions with the CEO around what I just one template for all receivables of cash outside of this building, and because that includes your query a few months ago about rubbish dumps. I think, but in any format where we take cash, we'll need to issue a receipt outside of this operation here.
Yeah, and through you, if we do go to a payment system at the caravan park and the camping area, it would be a booking system, almost like you would book a campsite through the national parks now. No money would have to change hands at all. And at the caravan park in particular, if electricity was provided as an option there, it would be some sort of swipe arrangement as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Bland.
I just want to follow up on that one as well while we're at it, because I've actually received a complaint from Canalpin in relation to the caravan park there and people moving in and utilising it free, not necessarily paying. Now, whether that is innuendo or not, but we need to follow up on that. If people are doing that and not doing basically what is the right thing, who is responsible? How does that happen if people are basically squatting in the caravan park?
So you may, I'm aware of one person who's had some fees waived for time at the caravan park. If somebody pops in overnight and we don't know about it, there's probably very little chance that we ever will know about somebody who comes late in the afternoon and then disappears first thing in the morning. We also have a longer term resident there at the moment. But if you have a specific concern, we'll follow that up.
I think this was basically locals squatting.
Okay, so you may well check.
However, I don't have details. Just something needs to be checked, I think.
Speak with the CEO later, Councillor. Anything else around the minute action list, councillors? Councillor Arthur, are you fiddling with the pen or are you about to ask something?
Just the Tindana 04 or 00421, the Tindana Cemetery, has been put back onto mains water. What is the watering regime which has been in place? Because the one that was presented before under a motion was about 10 times as much water as it would need. So I'm just wondering what sort of timelines have been put on, how many times a week? Because if you look at some of the the photos I sent down about some of the footpaths in Timmy, they're all couch and they're that high and they don't get any water. So it doesn't need a great deal of water. So I'm just wondering if we can get some clarification there.
Through you, Mayor, we'll take that on notice and I'll send a reply out of session.
Thank you.
Councillor Bland.
I'm assuming that 027/19, intention to release Arana, there's a number of actions in there that one is still outstanding, and that's the expressions of interest in community engagement. Is that date now realistic given the progress at Arana, at Wadmore site?
Through you, Mayor. We are planning to do there's some works being done under the drought arrangements, and that's basically to make safe and to make good most of that. We are looking to do some community engagement probably around Easter time, around what the community wants from that facility, what they see as long-term options for it. It's the start of the process. So we're still planning to do that before the end of this financial year.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Arthur.
This is just one that 199.20, which has actually been taken off the action list, and I would like to see it kept on there until something concrete has been decided. It's the mobile black spot funding. I think it's very important that we do keep onto that, and we keep meeting with Purser or whoever.
Through you, Mayor, the motion asks that I proceed with raising the issue and flagging it with the relevant concerns. We've done that. We now have nothing to do until we hear from them. So in a sense, how it was couched, that motion, it's finished. But I'm more than happy to put it back on. But it's being followed up. Purser are aware. We've had a letter back from DIT saying that they note our letter and their area of support for the project. It's now in Purser's hands about where it goes from here.
Councillor, I get the impression that the state's looking pretty favourably upon a fairly good amount of towers. That's the impression I get given, but we'll wait and see.
It's a theme, because of course, if Telstra and Telstra's the predominant provider, comes back with something that says there's no solution for this particular area, or the solution is going to cost you X amount of dollars, it's still up to the state through the Commonwealth to accept that proposition. So it's not a done deal, even if our black spots get recognised. It is highly dependent on Telstra, and I think Optus is coming into the equation on their solution to the issue and whether the state and the Commonwealth are prepared to pay for that solution.
Yeah. It was always state put in money before, and that's why we didn't get any, because the previous government didn't put any money in.
Yeah. And I did ask whether, because I'm aware that one council did make a contribution last time round, this round of funding wasn't expecting a contribution from the councils or any body that was putting up a submission.
Councillor Cormann.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 270/20, that council investigate the street number by visibility issue at Menengi and ensure that the number of each house can really seen by emergency service personnel. This completion this month. How are we going with that?
It's on or off.
Sorry, Councillor Coleman, I missed that completely.
But Councillor, we're having a little bit of debate about whether the red light's on or off.
Yeah, because I had, was it?
Yeah, so sorry, you actually muted yourself then. Then you put the chair into a spin that he's been muted for a while. That was the
No,
problem.
he's off. There's no red light on.
Circle or not, Councillor?
No.
It's no red circle now.
No, but he wasn't when he was speaking. He changed the lights. Well, start again.
Yeah, I'll start again. And
Start again.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, it was on red and it went off. So anyway, I'll start again, everybody. 270/20, that council investigate the street number by visibility issue in Canalpin, Menengi, Tarnban to ensure that number of each house can be easily seen by emergency services personnel. How are we going with that one, please?
We are going to have an advertising campaign to raise awareness with residents, to encourage them to have numbers that are visible to emergency services. Having said that, we're not going to do any compliance. If people choose not to have a number that's not visible for the emergency services, that's their call, but we will have a really campaign across Facebook and into our local newsletters to encourage people to do that.
Thank you.
Councillors, I prefer you leave your mics on.
They don't stay off. They keep popping back on.
That's what I mean, leave them on, so. Yeah, but the red means you're muted, councillor.
For about 10 seconds. And it disappears.
5.
Right.
And we'll save mistakes and putting the mayor into a spin thinking he was being muted for a while. That's what I was debating up here. Councillor Bland.
Question about the comments now on the screen and I'll use one of mine, and that is in relation to intention to re-release Arana. Can we just change Arana, please, to Wadmore site? Wadmore House site, I think.
Wadmore House.
Wadmore, yes.
Site, because it's,
Right now.
It's not really-
well, there's no, we don't have an official name, but it's not Arana site anymore.
It
And
was.
Trying to be a bit
Yes.
Yeah.
clarity about it, and that was incorrect.
So we can't probably change the words of the old motion. Is that what that is? Yeah.
Okay, then it needs to, now known as
Right.
Wadmore House, it needs a
Yes.
clarification because Arana's been gone now for some time. It's confusing.
Anything else in the minute action list, councillors? Okay. Questions with notice, councillor Roundtree?
First one I'm happy with.
Okay, first one, I'm going to find it, of course.
Around the name.
Yeah. In train, you got a second one?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say that I don't think the volunteer situation at the pool was handled very well this year. I think there's been quite a lot of disharmony. So back in April last year, there was a meeting where we sat down with the volunteers and talked about the need for there to be more volunteers and possibly paid supervisors so that the pool could, when it was done, could be open. There was not so much a guarantee, but a comment made that it wouldn't be that hard to find the volunteers needed to do the job. I think the volunteers at the time suggested that they had exhausted a lot of avenues and that this could possibly be harder than what it was. I think it was underestimated, the amount of trouble there would be. I'm hearing a lot of frustrations from the volunteers that work there. There was a comment that there was they couldn't advertise in the Hub newsletter because it was monthly. Well, it goes every month except December. So we possibly could have started that perhaps a little earlier. I was also advised that there was an under 18 person that was interested in being mentored through some positions, but that wasn't allowed to happen either. And I just think this council needs to remember it owns a pool and it needs to be proactive now in finding probably a full-time paid person to do that job that can be their job during summer and then perhaps do other things during winter. Or if the caravan park needs tending to, maybe there could be some position there. But I think just trying to go and rely on volunteers again for the next season is just going to be as frustrating as it has been for this season.
Councillor, I couldn't agree more. Just with the under 18, if we had a pool that needed more than one supervisor, we could have a person over 18 who was appropriately credentialed and they could supervise under 16. But because we only need one supervisor, we can't have anybody under 18. The rules just don't allow that. And I agree, I didn't realise how hard it would be to find pool lifesavers. We have had, in fact, we've turned ourselves inside out trying to find them. And I agree, we need to have a different solution around staffing for the next season. And taking the lead from your conversation, I think it's important that as a council, we manage the facility and recognise the wonderful work that the volunteers have done, but it's starting to be too much of an impost on them in a sense. I think we need to take stronger carriage of it.
Great.
A question, if I might, on that then. Can we please have a full costing then of what that may cost us in the future, given that if it has to be a full-time position, I understand Murray Bridges is as well, and what sort of work can we have a little bit of information that they and which team they're going to belong to?
So what we've had a discussion about, and probably on several occasions, is to look at almost like a outdoor park staff member who has a multitude of responsibilities. So in the pool season, it would be around the chlorine and the chemicals of the pool. It would be, now this is a big ask, so it may not eventuate this way, but also have the appropriate life-saving certificates. And then in the off-season, they belong to the park staff who do the outdoor work. And so it's a tailored position to do what we need to do at the pool, but also in terms of the parks activity as well. So now whether we can find somebody who looks like that or whether it needs to be 2 part-time people, only time will tell, but I can give you a guarantee that we will start that process as soon as this season is finished. Okay.
Councillor Lang.
On the issue of qualified personnel and possible perceived problems with getting that personnel, is there any thought that the council might consider some sort of swim training program in conjunction with the high schools to train up and coming possible personnel in our district?
So we could do that, councillor. It's just the age issue is an issue. So under 18s can't operate by themselves. Murray Bridge does have a couple of operators, lifesavers, who are underage, but they also have a supervisor who is over 18 and appropriately credentialed. So our problem is that we only need 1 supervisor at any one time, which means they've always got to be over 18.
We're going to move on, councillors. It is a questions on.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, just before we finish that, what I suggest, instead of we go off at a tangent, we go and talk to Tatiara, who've got 2 pools that are run, and Wattle Range Council, who've got 4 pools that they run, and find out how they do it. They're very similar to us. They don't run them full time. They're not all over the, like for 12 months of the year. They're open for a specific time. Instead of trying to, reinvent the wheel again, let's find out how the wheel is working.
Through you, we have approached all of our surrounding districts who have pools to find out how they operate them. And they all do them slightly differently. They all have access to different pools of people. But we've certainly done that.
I'm going to move on to the next question, which is around dogs in the pool. Did the dog swim or not?
No, dog didn't swim, but I do want to seek some clarification on the response that says, please note that volunteers of council do not have the delegated authority to ask a member of the public to cease an activity, and any issues that may arise need to be reported to council for the relevant authorised officer to follow up. I happened to be there that day. It was the pool user who called council and was given misinformation that then got brought back to the supervisor and caused the issue. So I think if you've got the volunteers there on the day, how is it that they can't enforce the council rules that are clearly on the signs if that's would be part of their job? I mean, otherwise you could have someone come in with a large dog and they simply don't act because they're not allowed to, according to that statement.
So you may, I think this is one where we need some common sense, like that's by the rules that the volunteers can't do that. But there would be nothing if the volunteers asked the person to remove the dog. The signs are very clear there and they reported that to council straight away. It's just, I suppose, protecting the volunteers in case, so that they are not put in a position where they don't have the delegations to provide that information. But I would not have an issue, if you like, if the volunteers asked somebody to remove a dog and then reported it immediately to us, because that's from a safety perspective and they would be protected, if that makes sense.
It sort of does. It's a bit of a crossover as to what happened, because that is what happened. The person was asked and shown the sign and all the rest of it, and then got clarification from council, and council said, no, that's fine.
And what was fine?
That the dog could come in.
No, and I was there that day too, councillor, and so our GI actually spoke to the woman involved with the dog, and she in the end understood why she couldn't have the dog there. The signs were very clear, and I'm not sure whether we actually in the first instance said the dog could be there, but the dog
Yes.
definitely couldn't be there,
In the
and we
first instance,
conveyed that.
Yeah. The first instance, it was relayed to her that she could bring the dog. And I just think it caused a lot of confusion, but the signs are there obviously for a reason. And I think if the volunteers want to enforce those signs and just say, here's a sign, this is what it says, they should have some support from council to do that.
And they would.
All right. Thank you.
Your next question, councillor, and I just did start at the start of the meeting. around acknowledgements and I suppose celebratory events or acknowledgements in a public sense like we did today. I have had some discussion with the CEO around do we need guidelines for the leadership group, and the conclusion was we don't really, but I don't know if that answers your question. I don't know.
So this wasn't an award of council. It had nothing to do with council. It was to recognise a member of the community who had been recognised at the state level. The Mayor and I were both invited to that celebration in Murray Bridge at the end of last year, and it happened to be when the lockdown was. We had a conversation, well, I had a conversation with the SA police force, say why couldn't we have this recognition in Tailem Bend? This is a Tailem Bend resident. And so the next best thing we thought was once, because only a limited number of people could go to that celebration, it was important enough from a state perspective. It's not every day we get members of our community who get state recognition. And I know one of the councillors has also mentioned that one of the young women in our community has received an Australia Day award. I would expect that would be a similar thing, that we would celebrate the successes of the people in our community by some sort of recognition. Now, whether it's an afternoon tea. Now, if council thinks that that's not an appropriate thing to do, then I'm more than happy not to look for those occasions, but it's up to, I suppose, just the celebration, not the, whoever the recipient is not the issue. It's about the celebration of what they've achieved in our community.
So for clarification, who paid for the afternoon tea?
The afternoon tea would have been councils.
Okay,
And it was scones and probably,
that's okay. So what procedure is in for other state award recipients to request council hold an afternoon tea for them? I think the issue here is making sure that there is some clarity around this, because I certainly know of other people that have won state awards that didn't know this was an option, wouldn't think to ask, and probably would wait for a volunteer recognition event to perhaps be recognised at that event. I just think I don't want to open a can of worms, but I worry that we may have.
so
It was requested we do this. I think that would be the wrong words, but I take on board what you're saying, Councillor, and I would have said after last year's National Volunteers Recognition Day that I don't know that that's an appropriate thing anymore, to have a sort of set function inviting our volunteers vis-a-vis recognising volunteers perhaps more in situ in their communities. So perhaps that we need to do more work in the general acknowledgement of, that's what I alluded to at the start of the meeting, volunteers or people that have achieved a result in this community, but I haven't come on the right formula yet, to be quite honest. So perhaps we need to ponder that in a workshop or something, because we really need to settle at what point do we, not you, we think that acknowledgement is appropriate.
I think through you, Mr Mayor, the volunteers are very important to all of our communities, and since our communities are widespread, it's also important that they be acknowledged within their community.
That's what my point is, Councillor, yes.
And so I think, we've had multiple different models over the years. None of them have been perfect about how you recognise volunteers, and they can also be reasonably expensive, or they don't attend unless there's buses up, for the elderly, etc. So I think we do need to do it. But I think we do need to do it, certainly in their communities. There is little point of having someone from Tintinara have to drive here to have scones and cream to have a recognition, unless that is what they want. We need to actually go there.
And we reflect that in how we do Australia Day at the moment. Councillor, are you somewhat satisfied?
Yes, I am.
Next question.
Is around the enforcement abilities. I understand, as previously stated, I understand the limitations council's got in regards to this matter. My question was more around, is council prepared to do something in the 21-22 financial year to apply higher rates to those who leave unsightly buildings in the main street? And I accept that this will be discussed at the rate review meeting this afternoon, because it does appear that seems to be council's only remaining option to deal with some of these unsightly buildings. So I'm sort of happy with the answer.
So the words that need to be done is abandoned, Councillor, and I don't know that they're abandoned yet.
Well, there's nothing in them.
Informed there's some work on the one on the south side of town ongoing at the moment.
South side. Would that be by, what's that? Okay.
Right, and your
Well, we
last
do
one.
need to look at that.
Your last one. His last one is around what was called greening Canalpin.
Yeah.
So I think this is the right time to discuss the strategic plan when adopted, which is some weeks away now. And then we put the meat on the bones, as they say on this. We're not allowed to say that anymore if we're vegan.
I think the issue I have is that this has been raised by the community in community vision plans for a number of years. It keeps on being discussed some 7 years later, suggesting that the issue wait until 2023 to be considered as a proposal. I don't think that's very fair and equitable for this matter. I think if we can find money for a whole range of other things, at the very least, a green refuge space in the town for bushfires would be at the very least something that ought to be a priority, at the very least.
Can I just make a comment on that? Council 6 years ago went through full costing of this project. Now, we should have it somewhere. And it worked out that water would be something like about $12 a kilolitre instead of $2 as at 39 it is now. It just was not, well, it wasn't viable in any state or form. And that was relying on being half paid for by a government grant. If it was paid for fully by a government grant, it probably still wouldn't be viable. And I just wonder, how many times we keep, and I'm not knocking that, but how many times we keep going back to the same thing. The whole process should be there. John Edmonds, Wilson Smith, who give us permission to go over his property, and all the costings were done.
So I think it'll come, I think it's been talked about in the strategic plan public response. Council can debate that when it adopts that. I take on board that there's some time lapses, councillor. I have seen the costings. We could have a discussion around what activity this council does, which is viable. If councillors want to start that debate, I welcome it. It'll be fascinating. But I think at this stage, I think the question's been answered, would be my point, councillor. But I do think, my personal view is that we do need a really good look at it again, is that as the one of our 5 towns that hasn't got relatively cheap irrigated water. Okay. That's all we have for questions on notice. Questions without notice? There is none. No, there is none. There is none. Councillor Taylor, sorry.
I have.
Well, my page is blank.
I have 4.
Righto.
Regarding the entrance statements and improvements to Tail and Bend using volunteers, the Progress Association have informed me that on the 12th of January, a letter was sent from the Progress Association to the CEO. They have not had a response or acknowledgement that the letter was received. Their words, not mine. And they'd like some information on how to take their proposals forward or even to have a discussion.
So through you, Mayor, I'll apologise, I haven't seen that letter yet, so I will find where that is.
Okay, I forwarded it again on the 10th of February direct to you.
Me? Oh, yes.
So, councillor, at this stage, I might talk about briefly our meeting with the head of the Department of Infrastructure and Transport. And in that process, and Bridget, I hope you have seen the letter by now.
Yes, I have.
The director who will be at the meeting on Wednesday at Tintinara, I understand, that's what he said he would be, the roadshow on road safety, Wednesday afternoon at 5 o'clock at Tintinara. But he has given us a commitment to take to government, see if it can be funded, a study on what would be from the Swamport Bridge to the Mallee Highway Junction. In that, I would take that we may be able to build into a funding proposal and design proposals, town entrances through Princess Highway, Tail and Bend, potentially dual laning out to Motorsport Park area. That's what I would take. The commitment, which he sort of confirmed, but the government would need to agree to fund the study. That was the letter. That's why I understood the letter. And
Yeah.
so that's where we're at with that, and perhaps we'd caught that up in the process.
I think that's fantastic if it goes ahead.
Yeah, I know.
But
If it
that's
goes
sort
ahead,
of
yes.
that's sort of big sky thinking, and I think the Progress Association are a
Wants
little
to keep the sky
bit
lower, yeah.
smaller than that, and would just like to tidy up some of the areas. And their restriction is that they require the volunteer induction, and they haven't done it. So I think that's the sticking point, is that they want to know if their small proposals would be acceptable, and if they are, how do they then go about getting the volunteer induction and training that they require.
Okay,
The second one is Gardner Road. Have the corrugations been rectified? Given I did send an extensive video of the issue, whilst some councillors may not think that the corrugations are excessive, I think that they are.
so councillor, a couple of us have driven on it. The repairs were done with relatively shaly material, and I think we need to regrade it, to be quite honest, my personal view, but James will get on to it. It hasn't been done to this point in time, I'm informed.
Next one is Wellington East.
Sorry, Mr Mayor.
Yeah.
I may comment on that.
Yeah.
I was contacted by a ratepayer who has property out that end. He indicated to me he did forward complaint letters to council soon after that work was done. So has he received any comments back from council?
Chair, councillor.
So it would be useful if he could be cut in the loop.
Tell us the name afterwards, councillor, please.
I can tell you now, it's Mr Simcock.
Right, they were repairs. It was not a resheet. And there's a pending minute cost resheeting a part of it or rebuilding a part of it, isn't there? Third question, councillor.
The Wellington East tank installation, has it been completed? Thank you. And the Wellington East intake pipeline, has that been repaired, the suction pipe?
No, it hasn't been permanently repaired. The existing, makeshift or the temporary line is working sufficiently, and the testing results came back to show that it's actually has lower levels of organisms in water than what the original location does on the other side of the river. So we're investigating whether a permanent solution inside the marina is better than a permanent solution directly in the river. So that's being undertaken, but we're expecting to be getting that work done in the next sort of month or so.
So do we, thank you.
At the moment, everyone on that suction is working as per the original one was prior to the breakdown.
So have we got any costings for work improvements or site improvements or?
We're just going through that now, councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions without notice? There being none, item 6.1, Mayor's report. Australia Day I felt went pretty well. The two I did, councillors, Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just talking about Australia Day, when you went out to Sherlock, it also says about the musical experience opening. Could you enlighten us a bit about that?
So the best I understand it is a outdoor musical equipment playground has been constructed over probably the last 2.5, 3 years. I think it was a bit of a drought initiative and an arts initiative. Mr. Mark Thompson leading that sort of part of it, and him and a few of his mates are involved in the steel work and that. And it was, a lot of this stuff was salvaged farm machinery from the district, and particularly it was done at Mr. John Peters' shed, mostly the building of it. And it's worked into a beautiful little experience. If you want to take anyone there for a bit of a muck around with the different sounds you can get out of the things, and you know, different engineers were involved in different sort of public art, putting one very big head of wheat, which is pretty common out there at Sherlock, is big rain, I'm told. And yeah, no, it's a credit to the community, and along with our allocations of funding for the hall upgrade and the toilets there, we've made a good little stopover point on the Mallee Highway now.
I just heard good feedback from it, that's all, and I thought I'd ask about it. Thank you.
So we probably need to include that in a route planning and tourism issues, because it is really quite nice now.
Thank you.
Councillor Bland, you got your hand up.
So, on January 22nd, you met with Mr. Stewart from Salt Creek rubbish dumping. Can you give us an update or an outcome, hopefully?
What we could say is the CRME stood there for an hour and a half talking to him and his partner. And a lot of people tried to go to the toilet. It used to have open. That's the one thing I would say. Second thing I'd say is none of those people come and asked us for where the toilet was. The third thing I'd say is a couple of them didn't have to ask because they went around the corner. We're, I suppose, going down a path of negotiating with the Department of Environment and Water, in particular with the National Parks Division around this, and they're doing some studies, and Bridget might elaborate in a minute. We also mentioned at our meeting with Mr. Braxton Smith, in other words, the Highways Department, who seem less enthused about funding or helping us deal with a facility there. I did some radio somewhere there around that some time ago. My view is that the solution is for a facility to be built on the opposite side of the road to that area, which would be public. We did then visit the other provider of coffee van there, and had quite a discussion with them, and they did have a small portaloo there. And we checked out Salt Creek Road while we're there. I would think it'll take a year or two of planning, and I think Jew may address the issue. We can make a few changes to some signs, we believe. It'll probably revolve around as much around a strategic plan or a review of the plan of the Coorong National Park. Do you want to add to that? No, I'll let you finish the add to that first.
We, as the Mayor said, we did talk with Mr. Stewart and his partner for quite a while. Apart from the conversation with Jew, just as a little bit, I did write back to Mr. Stewart and ask him to remove his signs, because for all intents and purposes, if you're driving along, you still think that facility is open. I haven't heard back from him about that. With the Jew, we're having discussions, and it started when we met with John Schultz, the CEO, a couple of months ago. Jew are going to do some master planning of the Coorong National Park, but they've come to us to see if we're interested in being a partner with it, because they'll spill out of the national park and do from Sugar Beach down to Salt Creek and make it a master plan that covers not only their particular footprint but ours, so that it's a holistic type of thing. In that discussion, we will talk with them about the public toilets again, or some facility. Now, what it looks like or what you call it is probably open for discussion. That in their master planning of the whole district, and that they will be starting that within the next couple of months.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Hill.
Through you, Mayor. So has anyone asked Mr. Stewart to remove his listing on Google, because he still has his road house listed on Google as open?
So I didn't ask him specifically about Google because I wasn't aware of that, and probably, but I did ask him to remove the signs, any signage that he had that indicates that he's still open. The interesting thing was that the mayor, 20 vehicles stopped during that time, and none of them had any difficulty with walking around to the back of the property, which is Mr. Stewart's property, to use it as a public facility, as a toilet. So, and we watched them time and time again do that.
Not one of them come and asked us.
No, but there's also, in his defence, I suppose, there is nothing that indicates those toilets are closed or the facility is closed. So people still pull up, but the amazing thing was that people then sort of was still okay then to use the back of his fence.
Desperate.
So I would say it's until we resolve an issue of a facility there, this will be ongoing. Councillor Hill, sorry.
That was going to be my comment about signage. If I was the property owner, I would be putting up signs to make it very clear that it's private property. Do not enter. Trespassers will be prosecuted.
Absolutely.
Some sort of attempt to actually discourage people who have been used in the past to go into that facility. So I think there needs to be a little bit more work on behalf of the property owner to make it clear to the public that that is a private residence.
So, and agree, we can't make him do that. Similarly, this is the second time we've asked him if, in its best interest to remove those signs. It's entirely up to him.
Thank you. On that Councillor Ling, on that subject.
On that subject, he has closed the roadhouse. He still has got the caravan park, and he still has the accommodation there. So I don't know what he's licensing or how he's handling that, but I believe it's still a registered caravan park, camping area. I don't know how many people use it, but going around the back to where the backpackers' accommodation, which are worse than shearers' quarters, are located. Yeah,
More work will be required, councillor.
yes.
I'm going to just move on to the Lodge of St John, or the Lodge of Fortitude, which is amalgamated to Tailem Bend and Strathalbyn Lodge. They presented us with enough money to put 2 park seats, one at Meningie, one at Tailem Bend from memory. Very nice of them. A function here. On the 5th, we met with Mr Tony Braxton Smith and his advisors in Adelaide, which was a fairly challenging meeting, but I think we may be able to get some result out of that. He's the Chief Executive of Department of Infrastructure and Transport. We attended the Limestone Coast Local Government Association meeting at Bordertown last Friday, which was fascinating. The last one I might talk about is the Yamali Bushfire Recovery meetings, of which another one was last night, which was actually very well attended. I think at this stage we'll be able to not have to pursue things as hard as perhaps not as hard, but as intensive. I think we've done a reasonable job, to be quite honest, in organising a couple of meetings, particularly Tracy. And I think the right people are in place to help the people out there that need help. Is what I'd word it. We had a speaker who was a victim of the Wangari fires 15 years ago, that is now, last night as our principal speaker. It was very good. Who also happens to be one of the FAB mentors. Any other questions around my report? Councillor Bland, then Ling.
Just quickly on the 2 park seats that have been donated, one to Meningie and one to Tailem. A, have we identified sites? And B, have we sent a letter of thank you?
I don't know if we've identified the sites.
No, we haven't. And the letter of thank you will go out as well.
Council's also purchased a copy of their history book. If you want to peruse that, that'll be fascinating, given some of the extracts that were read out at the presentation. Councillor Lang.
Attendance at MRLGA meeting. I'm just wondering if any feedback on MDA's change of name. I know there's a number of other councils also against the issue with the MDA name change. I
think we're in unison against a change of name, councillor, from memory.
Yep.
I'm sure we are, actually. I think it was briefly discussed again. You weren't there, I was only one there.
I know LGA is still very strong against it.
Yeah, it appears to be, apparently the South Australians are the ones that are dead against it. The rest of the people are neutral. We'll get to that as an item, an agenda item a bit later, I notice.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you. Councillor Hill, you got anything to add, councillor?
No. Pretty straightforward.
Okay, councillor Lang, you got anything you wish to
Not at this
focus
time.
on?
No, thank you.
Being nothing, we move on to notices of motion. There are none. Motions without notice, councillors. I'll take it there is none. We'll move on to Office of the Chief Executive Officer, Murray Darling Association, Councillor Rountree.
I would like to move that we send Councillor Hill and Councillor Coleman, if he's interested, to the Murray Darling Association National Conference and AGM to be held in Wentworth, New South Wales in May.
Councillor Taylor
Seconding.
that. Okay. Councillor Rountree, you wish to elaborate at all?
Oh, no, I'll reserve to the end, thanks.
Councillor Taylor. Anyone else wish to speak for or against? Councillor Lang.
Regard to item 1, I'd like to propose a slight amendment if necessary. At the AGM, we have a delegate and a proxy should be appointed. So if we're sending 2 councillors, which I'm against, one of them should be a declared proxy should the delegate find herself in a position where she can't attend.
You would like to at least define that in this motion with Councillors Hill and Coleman, who's a delegate and the proxy?
Correct. Well, there can only be a proxy. The CEO is going to be the council's delegate if she is attending.
Your council's delegate on this one, yeah, that's right.
We were so strong against saving money though, and it just seems to be, what do they call it, a junket tour?
I'd be careful, councillor. Do you wish, or does the mover or seconder wish to nominate Councillor Hill's requirement, who is the proxy, please?
Through you, Mr Mayor, do you think it's appropriate that we perhaps ask them both if they do wish to attend before we proceed?
Certainly, I'll start with one of our delegates anyway, Councillor Corman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have family issues or conditions that make this a bit difficult. I prefer not to go. If I could,
Okay.
please.
No, perhaps if you were going to withdraw, councillor, that nomination. Councillor Hill has indicated she'd like to go though.
I'm
but-
prepared to go, yeah.
So Councillor Hill could be a proxy if that was the case.
So through you, Mr Mayor, we can amend the motion to say that Councillor Tracy Hill as proxy
Yeah,
at the Murray Darling.
the council's indicated should be in the area for other purposes, so
Yep.
keep the cost down.
Happy with that.
As I'm taking it as Councillor Hill in the item 1 and in brackets and council's proxy. On that, any further debate around this?
Yes, I'd just like to, we had an email from Councillor Hill regarding this, and what I've got to remind that you're representing the council, not your own thoughts. And code of conflict of interest was very much in that email you sent out. The other thing is, I would love, and I've asked this for many times, Councillor Lang would agree with me, could we get the copy of all the motions and actions that were passed at the last annual general meeting and what has ever been done with them? Because it just goes, every year you have an annual general meeting, they pass 14 motions and 3 actions, and in the end of the day, nothing ever gets done. So my thought was that if we do not get some, some solid feedback and solid works out of these, we're wasting our time and the ratepayers' money sending people to these.
Your first point, sorry, I've got a mind blank, is in relation to the alleged conflict of interest. I've had this discussion with Councillor Hill. I really don't think she has one, to be quite honest. She has a lot of knowledge, but I think she's a common user of the lake with a lot of us. So I've never felt that, and I've had that discussion long ago. Yes, if we weren't there though, what I would say, I suppose, is that at the moment, this year, we haven't really been to many things at all. Some may call it something else.
But that's no excuse.
No, I know, I'm aware
you
of-
haven't been to anything.
I'm aware of that, but.
You go to something because you're going to get something
Gonna get
out of it,
something
or the
result.
ratepayers are going to get something out of it.
But it's important we have a watching brief on this subject. I've actually seen Councillor Taylor first, and I'll be back to Councillor Hill and Bland, then Ling, I think. Right.
Through you, Mayor, respectfully, I think we all at some point in time have a conflict of interest with something because we live in the area or the district, and something's going to come up which affects us. Therefore, I don't see this as a specific conflict of interest. I just wanted to clarify with Councillor Hill, through you, Mayor. Last time she attended something, she provided a comprehensive
Really
report.
did. Well,
And therefore, just by very nature of her diligence, I would just ask if she intends to do that again.
sure she would. Councillor Hill, you're next anyway, so.
2 things. One is, I think my email was more about that my
Mechanics
knowledge
of it,
was my knowledge base rather than, send me on a junket sort of thing. Secondly, I am going to be saving council money because I will be getting up there under my own steam. We have a long-standing invitation to attend Tolano Station up there, and we will be my husband and I will be travelling and staying locally. So that will not be a cost apart from the actual conference cost itself.
Yeah. No, I noted that, Councillor. Councillor Bland?
Yes, I think that we need to realise that this council's a significant water area, both river, lakes and Coorong as well, and it is significant no matter what we do for our farming community, for tourism, for a whole range of things. So I think we do have a foot in the water here, so to say, and I think that it's really important that we send him along. I do understand Councillor Arthur's problem about wanting to see some actions from this group, and we are probably considered small players at the bottom of the stream. However, I think we need to be there if we're going to be proactive at all. And I also think that it's probably time we became more proactive in this area again. We have this discussion pretty much every year.
Yeah, councillor, and I would attend this, but if you see the timing at the time of the year, it's not exactly my easiest month. Probably why, otherwise I would think I would want to go. Councillor Ling, did you have a hand up?
I did. I had it up when Councillor Arthur was speaking.
Challenge of the spread
In fact,
chamber.
it was a response to Councillor Arthur.
Because I thought he thought you'd agree, but I've been around. I know that mightn't be the case.
I do agree to a point. It's a point that he has raised for several years now, and it was corrected several years ago, and he was advised of that several times in council. All the prior motions are on the MDA website, as well as an ongoing action list of what things have been actioned. I don't know if it's still there. I haven't been back to look at it of recent. And there has been some changes to the website. So.
Okay. Councillor Bland, we're sort of getting out of questions now.
Just one point, though, that was brought up in relation with Councillor Taylor's comments about Councillor Hill's report, which was extensive.
It was extensive.
Just to remind everyone that we are all supposed to either provide an individual report or a combined report when we attend any paid for function. So it is assumed, I think, that we would have to do that.
In this format, yes. Councillor Yench, yes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I concur with Councillor Bland's take on this. I think it's imperative that we have an active role within this organisation by the bare minimum of attending, but also being able to inform council and our community what is going on. We are a complicated council with our dry land and with our water issues, and it is imperative that we keep a watch and brief on what is coming down with the Murray-Darling, because they appear, association, because they do appear to be in a little bit of turmoil with a few of the things they're changing, and therefore we need to be aware of what may or may not affect us.
Thank you. I'm going to firstly, councillor, you will close, I hope.
Just in closing, Coorong by name is a significant water area. It's in our name, it's what we do. I don't feel at all that Councillor Hill has a conflict of interest. In fact, she's got a very strong interest, which I think stands us in good stead. And she's got a great knowledge of all of this area. So I close debate.
Thank you. It is as it reads on the screen, councillors, which puts Councillor Hill as our voting proxy as well as attending. The CEO will be attending, I think, with any luck.
Luck has nothing to do with it.
Put the motion. All those in favour? Councillor Taylor, you're happy for me to put the motion, I presume. Thank you. Those against, that's carried unanimously. Item number 2 must be somewhere here. No, it's not. It's a miracle, isn't it? Council policies. Agenda item 9.1. There a mover, Councillor.
Can I just point out, Mayor, the screen isn't on?
Oh.
Can you get?
I can't say they're all.
So our screen's not on, but the rest of them are on. Thank you for that, sorry. I thought you were moving the meeting along quickly. 9.1, debt recovery and financial hardship policy review. Someone wish to move that way? Councillor Yench, then Councillor Ling as the seconder. Councillor, you wish to discuss this? Lead it.
Mr Mayor, let's just make
No, sorry, I'm over here.
No, I'm happy to wait.
You're happy to wait? Councillor Arthur.
I'd just like to make a comment. Previously, we were, for a while, getting any changes in the policies that are underlined so you can go through. So you don't have to read the old policy, the new policy, try and meld them together. So if it is at all possible, which I feel it should be, can we proceed with that method in future?
Yeah, certainly.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we generally try to provide that for you. This one was quite some significant changes, and I believe it might have caused more headache than not. So we've decided, in this report, we provided the actual changes rather than showing them. It was very colourful by the time we made all the changes.
Well, there was, and that's what, like it makes it hard going back and forwards. The changes where it used to be,
So
put it in red or red underlined.
so page 20 does actually list all the changes
Page 20.
of the
Agenda.
agenda.
20. Page 20 is Tracy Hill, according to me. Of the agenda.
Of the agenda.
Oh, okay.
You found it, councillor.
I found it, yeah.
While you're pondering, now I'll go to councillor Roundtree.
Yeah.
Just, I'm pretty sure I might have my two bits confused here, but when we talk about pensioners needing to pay the first $500, is that stipulated in the Local Government Act? So does that make sense? Like I read in there and it's hard to now find it because I've got so many notes on this thing. I think it was section 9, 5th paragraph. Can you please elaborate why a pensioner needs to pay the first $500? Is that our rule or is that a government rule?
The question whether that's part of the Act or whether that's our policy.
It's in the Act.
In the Act, councillor?
Okay, so it's in the Act. With interest payable, if a person's postponing their rates, it's generally that they're in a position where they don't have the money to pay now what's due. So if we're charging them interest on the amount that's been postponed, which is compounded monthly, aren't we just exacerbating their overall debt due and sort of penalising them because they can't pay and then creating an ongoing burden of stress? I mean, aren't we just making it worse by having compounding interest on postponement of rates?
We have the rates officer at the back and she will be happy to provide a.
But we do need the mic out there. We've decided if we have an officer speak from the rear of the room, we should have the mic so that the public at least hear from our point of view the response.
Through the chair there, to answer that question, it needs to be understood that postponement of rates, what you're referring to is only directly associated with senior postponements, two very separate sections of the Local Government Act. So the interest that is charged is legislated under the Local Government Act. So, and there is a very detailed application that any pensioner that needs or that wants to apply for that can do so. And so postponement as per an arrangement as such, which has a completely different interest component applied to it, is very separate. So you need to understand that postponement for seniors and postponement of your instalment, two very separate pieces of legislation.
So then the overall question of putting interest on people that are postponing because they have trouble paying, doesn't that seem like a bit of a crazy thing to do? So what's the incentive there to make them
To
pay?
the mic, councillor. We're always to the mic.
Is the incentive to speed up the payment or by putting interest on postponement?
Well, it's a burden that council certainly have to carry, and it can be quite a large burden when people postpone their rates as a senior postponement. They're the ones that only have to pay $500 of the total amount paid.
And then they pay interest on the balance, compounded monthly.
They certainly do.
I'm only guessing here, Mayor, but generally when there's these arrangements in place with seniors,
it's almost like I'll call it like a reverse mortgage type of thing. So there's an expectation that at the end of the day, the rates may be claimable through an estate. So it's like giving a reprieve up front, but with an expectation that at some point the council may be able to recover through their estate. That's generally the principle behind it.
Councillor Rauchi, you're finished.
Yes.
Councillor Taylor.
Through you, Mayor. So what checks are there which ensure that the person who is doing that arrangement, that seniors arrangement, has the ability to pay in the long term and doesn't, is there a charge on the property or so that they don't, I mean, how do we recover that debt in the long term?
Yeah, through the chair, to answer that, that debt through the long term, in the beginning of it, I, as the rates officer, have to ensure that they have a certain amount of equity in their property to be able to postpone it. Therefore, when it comes time to sell the property, when they either sell the property or the person passes away and it's sold as an estate, that there is enough equity in the property to clear that debt. So that there is a large criteria that sits behind postponing somebody's rates under seniors postponement.
Councillor Bland.
Mr. Mayor, just a statement really. We've had experience in the past where we've had elderly people or older people with significant assets, multiple pieces of land, who have chosen not to pay their rates and were most offended when we asked them to do so because they felt that they were the children's inheritance and therefore shouldn't have to pay it, and council should just wear the debt and they should not have to pay their rates in any rate. That was a very difficult discussion to do if we don't stick by some policy statements here.
So rates are a charge upon the land, councillors. Simple as that, along with some other state taxes and authorities. It's a simple process. So on the transference of a property or an estate being wound up, that money will come out on that process on that day, which is why land agents do a title search and we respond under some section, Debbie, remind me of. Section 7. There you go, which is many little things happen that day. I think Councillor Ling, you sort of had your hand in the air a bit.
What?
No. Councillor Arthur's always flexing his fingers, but I didn't take it as he wanted to speak. Okay, councillors, we're ready to close debate. Councillor, you
Close debate.
close
Thank
that
you.
quickly. All right. Thank you for that. It is as it reads. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you. Item whatever it is. 10.1, section 41 committees or section 43 subsidiaries. This is
No.
Missed one.
Petty cash
Petty
policy.
9.2, Mr Mayor.
I'm going to change this way. Doesn't work for me.
I so move when you find it.
I'll second that.
Moved councillor Ling, seconded councillor Gill, I think I heard.
Yes.
Thank you. I found it. Is there any discussion around that policy? Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Excuse my ignorance. Who is the Organisation Development Coordinator?
You mean the person's name?
That's your person's name or the position, councillor?
Well, the author of the report.
Oh, the author of the report.
Hmm.
One of council's officers, councillor.
Thank you.
Any further debate around this? I'll put the motion, councillor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Now we go to whatever I went to, 10.1. Minutes of the Infrastructure and Assets Committee. Councillors, someone move that way, please. Councillor Qualman. Is there a second up? Don't rush me. Councillor Arthur. Any discussion around those minutes? Councillor Roundtree, then Councillor Taylor.
So, under section 4, questions without notice, councillor Arthur asked if DIT would be invoiced for the works council carried out on its behalf. The minutes say a response was provided by the works coordinator. Can you tell me what that response was and can that be minuted? Because I wasn't at that meeting.
Who's that question to?
Trying to find it, sorry.
So it's section 4, questions without notice in the minutes.
Yes, councillor, we be fair to say in the discussions I had with the director, we didn't get near this.
So through you, Mayor, we will invoice. Could I suggest that it's an exercise in futility, but we will do that if that's a request of council.
So my question was, can you tell me what the response that was given on the day and what was that response? Not that you need to necessarily do it, just what was the outcome of that
We didn't get to as
question?
many as sense.
Mr Mayor, can I answer? The response was, we didn't know about that we were doing it.
We're mowing that area.
It has been done and we don't know or at those present at the infrastructure and assets meeting did not know we were doing that particular DIT mowing.
It's the one about 300 metres on the northwestern side of Culburra. There's one which is technically out of town, therefore not ours. That was why the question was around this.
So moving on from that, with the rest of those answers given in the minutes, where it says a response was provided, for the rest of the council who were not at that meeting, how do they know what those questions are? I think there is a procedural thing here that we should possibly minute those answers, so then they don't have to be brought back and answered here, because otherwise I'm going to ask you what those answers were to those questions for the benefit of the others that weren't even in that room that might want to know.
That is a good point. That was brought up.
So, well, it means
a couple
nothing.
months ago, I think, too.
Yeah, it means nothing.
So councillors, the advice would be you wouldn't normally write down everything that was said in the answer, but if a motion was to reinforce that or ask for that to be recorded, that would be the case for the committee. I take on board what you're saying.
Well, then it's all through email, it will be raised at
They
these
are
meetings.
questions without notice, and if councillors wish questions to be on notice, that's a different process.
Sure.
And that applies the same in committee as it does in this forum today.
Then I would like to request that the minutes, that the answers to those questions be explained to us now and minuted, so that we have them.
So that would be an issue for that committee to decide, councillor.
So that has to go back to INA through you,
Well, it's a
Mr.
committee's process, so the committee will decide.
But then they put their minutes to this committee to accept and receive them, but we don't know what the answers were to those questions.
No, I take on board what you're saying about that group of questions there today, but if you want the committee to have more information in it with questions without notice, then the committee would have to have a policy around that, or the chair would have to say you need to move that to the next committee meeting on notice.
So these minutes have to go back to INA, at which I can raise it at INA and have them fleshed out for an answer. But then but where do they go from there? Do they come back here?
We can go around backwards and forwards all day.
So this is my problem. I just wish we just could simply get answers to questions without the rigmarole sitting behind it. That just simply we read through and said, it was a great question. I wanted to know the answer and I wasn't at that meeting. So how do I find the answer?
I know what you're saying. Well, I think we'll be able to live stream that fairly soon, or we will be. Committees potentially, or some of them anyway. We are considering going out in visiting areas more there.
Not an answer to my question.
No, that the process is, perhaps the chair of the committee might want to reflect on this, and the committee may.
Well, Mr Mayor, this has been brought up before, also with the Finance Committee, where the same sort of response. But I'm in agreement 100% with Councillor Roundtree, because everybody here is expected to vote on something that I don't know what the result was. So that's
That's why
why I believe it should be in there. It only has to be a small notation.
So I'd come back to where I started. If the questions without notice, if the people want them to have more flesh in them, they will need to move them as a motion without notice.
So just from a procedural point of view, Mayor, at a meeting of the INA, if it comes up as a question without notice, we then have to turn around and then bring that up as a motion without notice?
That's the way I would see the process working.
Can we do a standing motion that says we would now like questions without all questions without notice to be recorded?
So councillors, if you wished in any of the committees, you notice further on, motions without notice nil. You wished it, your answer to be more enactable, for want of a better word, rather than a question, then perhaps you need to move it without notice.
Do you think then there's a reason to get it, to not even have questions without notice and move that section straight to motions?
Well, I would have been considering that today in the process in this room, to be quite honest. At what point do we debate questions on notice or without notice?
Move them straight to motions without
Well,
notice.
it's a procedural issue that we perhaps need to adapt to.
I wouldn't mind if we did a little bit more exploration of that before and just consider what you're asking Councillor Roundtree in terms of a couple of dot points in terms of answers to those questions, because I'm just wondering, and I'm sure the governance person will have a view, but moving it to motions with notice to get the same response, I think maybe just an exercise for the sake of an exercise. We'll have a look at how we might be able to do it a little differently to satisfy those answers.
I would very much appreciate it, because this has been a long-standing bugbear of mine, that we go around in circles, and if I want to challenge any of this, it goes back to INA, but it doesn't then come back to here as the next lot of INA minutes. So I just think procedurally there needs to be.
Councillor, you don't need to challenge it because it's not a motion.
Well, even just to get the information, then challenge is the wrong word, but just to have that knowledge before we accept this, I don't know the answers to these questions.
You don't need to accept what was said there. It's just,
wasn't it to receive and note it?
well, you receive and note. You don't have to accept.
I don't know. It seems to have some bearing. Going forward, we seem to be locked into these things that we say.
The question was asked, answer was given, and there is no action required. The question, it's not a motion. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to know if the council would be willing to extend membership of this committee, because I find this extremely frustrating in that a response was given, doesn't tell me what happened. And I do attempt to get at some of these, but I can't get to all of them I haven't arranged to be at them, but.
We'll have a little discussion around the governance arrangements between committees and council. I think that's what you're alluding to, councillor. And in particularly in this area where things are raised without any notice. Often the staff can't answer something they're not got a little bit of a heads up on, how we manage that. Councillor Hill and Leng.
Just to comment through you, Chair,
Yeah.
I would think that recording the committee meetings might be a way of alleviating a lot of that problem.
Yeah, and that we know, thanks, but one of the principles the committees did discuss was actually visiting towns outside this room. And that makes that actually quite complicated vis-a-vis. This is a matter of flexibility versus accountability. I take your point there. Councillor Leng.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item 3, a question with notice from Councillor Qualman in regard to a solid white line at the corner of Jervois Terrace and Granite Road, which I believe Jervois Terrace is the one that comes out alongside of, not Crawford's. Carslake, thank you. Without just saying that's SAPOL's job, have we actually investigated why the solid white line was there? I believe it's there because of the railway crossing, but should there be a give way sign there to accompany that white line? Or is it just a white line that should be obeyed because of the train crossing, in which I must say the driver is not facing, therefore is not obliged to stop? A white line is normally a stop, but if SAPOL haven't got the right information or the right signs are there, they can't take any action anyway. And that was the case in Meningie when we had a lack of speed signs, which I've since had corrected. So it's no good just saying SAPOL, that's SAPOL's job. It's our job to ensure that we have the pertinent road signs in place.
So, councillor, the second line of the response is councillor is currently seeking advice from SAPOL. And the councillor, when he raised the thing in committee, and I've been had a look at it since, it is somewhat convincing, because I think you have right, we've got clashing of 2 or 3 laws. Nonetheless, we're seeking the advice of that process around appropriate signage in that tight zone very close to the railway, main railway crossing in this town. Councillor Coleman, you wish to add, it was your question.
Yeah, thank you. I'll take the opportunity. That's the reason I did ask. It just concerns and emphasise that that when we do our road signage and line marking, that we get it correct. That's why I've raised this. That's all.
I don't think we've changed it in recent times, councillor, but it's been an interesting one for some time. Okay, I'm trying to work out where we were. Just receiving the minutes. That's all we're doing. Any further? I'm gonna put the motion. This is number 1, 10, number 1. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried 7-2 with councillors Rountree and Taylor voting against it. The rest of the councillors voting for the motion, please, Anna. That's carried. Item 11.1, staff accommodation. Is it recommendation? Someone move that way, please. Councillor Ling. Councillor Yench is the seconder. Any discussion around this? Councillor Rountree is first, and Councillor Taylor.
The problem I see with these policies merging into one HR document is I'm assuming that will mean that these policies no longer come before council, which means that it is possible for the CEO, not suggesting anything here, but any CEO or staff to amend rules, which we would then be none the wiser of. And I think it's actually been useful for us to understand some of these policies in the past. How would we overcome elected members not seeing those policies? And why wouldn't these policies just form part of a human resources package document as they currently stand without not making them policies, and what is gained by dismantling them and making them just a HR document?
So I can answer on a general. HR documents are, or in my experience, my whole life, are internal documents, not public documents. And you're suggesting that you want them as public council documents?
I'm suggesting that the policies that we have at the moment, which are public council documents that we get to see as elected members, under this new arrangement, we will no longer see them.
So you may, only for HR documentation. We have documentation around other things such as vehicle use that's in the public domain, but HR, and Councillor, don't get me wrong, I'm more than happy for it to be in the public domain. We do so little travel in this organisation that it's probably one of the lowest risk areas that we have. It's just we were flagging with you that we are putting together a HR manual. This will be covered in that because it has been a topic of conversation and we haven't got around to making it a public document. If we were to make it a public document, it would just be a standalone policy of about 2 pages. It's just generally not the practice.
Councillor Taylor.
Through you, Mayor, so I was unclear as to whether the HR manual was supplemental or whether the HR manual was incorporating the policies, or whether the policies were going to remain. If the policies are going to be incorporated, which policies are to be removed?
So we don't have a comprehensive HR manual at the moment. We're currently putting it together, and generally HR policies support the EBAs that we have in place. So it's about the process of how things happen. And we are just at this moment compiling all of the things where we don't have a significant process around a particular issue.
So I was unclear as to, because of the way it's worded, it almost sounds as though policies which would normally come to the council are being replaced with an HR manual. So it was unclear.
So we have very few HR policies in the public domain now. We have very few HR policies. So and the director can correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's really was to flag with you that we are taking steps to have a policy in place that's an internal. internal policy around staff accommodation. It will also have things around a whole lot of other things about performance assessments and annual leave and all types of things. So this was just, and we wanted to flag with you because it had been a conversation for many, many council meetings to say we are taking steps to address it. It will be in our HR policy document, our HR manual.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I understand the need and requirement for an HR manual. But it was just because the words policy are mentioned in this document, it almost suggested as though policies which would come to council have been replaced.
That's how I read it.
And I think what you're saying is that all policies that normally come to council will still come to council. We'll just have an HR manual.
Right. So yes, we're not going to change the policies that
Okay.
should be in the public domain.
Yeah.
That's not
Right.
so, but we've used the word policy with the accommodation all through the conversation. So I think that's probably where the trip up's been in a sense, but no.
Councillor Bland.
As this
Councillor
is
Ling.
a new and more extensive manual, is it possible for us to see the index of the manual so we know that there is actually a statement in relation to whether it be employee or council?
We can circulate that. That's not a problem.
That's, I'm not suggesting we see it all, just the index.
Councillor Ling.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Through yourself. Is there any reason why with a HR manual, the existing policies such as accommodation couldn't be actually referenced but contained in the manual, and just so that we still have say in the matter?
So there's two questions there, councillor. We can certainly reference whatever policies are in the public domain if as they relate to the HR manual. You're then suggesting, and Councillor Bland is asking for the index. We can circulate the HR manual at a session that you all can have a look at. That's not a problem at all. It's just generally not in the public domain as a public policy.
Thank you.
Councillor Arthur.
Mr Mayor, I'd just like to make the comment. The HR manual, if you want to do that, is good, but we've still got to have the policies out there that the people can see. This is one of the problems we've had, is with some of the policies which haven't been adhered to, and to say that the staff can't have a policy that's out there for the general public, the ratepayer who's paying the dollars, is just very, very wrong. And this is what has been the trouble over the past and what has caused a lot of problems. It's like, you know, if you talk to people and they say, what are you doing? We've got a human resource manual, which is run by the staff. We've got no say in it. And they're going to say, well, hang on, that's not right. You know, why haven't you got policies that they can see? The other ones, it's their money. It's not our money. And so I'm dead against taking these policies out. You can include them in your human resource manual, and you should, but I'm very against taking them out and putting them into a manual which is, you know, it's run by the staff. That's what it's run by.
Not the way I read this is about upgrading a human resource manual, not replacing a policy. That's what I'm reading at this stage. Anyone else?
The motion, Mr Mayor, is the council receive and note the report regarding implementation of your human resource manual. When you go through the background and all that, you know, about the accommodation, is it relevant to the motion?
Through you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to reiterate, when a year ago, when I first commenced, it was stressed to me that we do a service review and we try and find efficiencies and ways of saving staff resourcing. The HR manual is definitely that, because it eliminates the need to write a whole heap of individual policies for every single thing that happens with HR. So it is a plus in relation to the service review. And my intention was, when the HR manual was completed, for us to come and present to you and show you. I guess it was going to kind of be a brag fest, because staff are really involved and keen to get the processes and procedures in place so we can be more efficient and have some cost savings.
So would it be appropriate for this motion to be deferred until that presentation is given? The Bragg Fest.
We still want to work on the manual.
No, just
We can present the manual.
present the manual. So if that was the understanding, councillors, is that good enough?
I have a question in relation to the words human resource manual, and we're talking about policy of council and the required policy. I think that by perhaps modifying the recommendations rather than receiving a report regarding the implementation of the human resource manual, there's not enough clarity about what councillors are asking. I don't think there's any argument that there should be a working human resource manual, but it's where the policies that already exist under legislation that we're required to see, if they exist within that manual, then I think there needs more clarification around that, because it does double up in here a little bit in the way it's written.
And through you, Mayor, I think the issue may be the way we use the word policy.
Correct.
So there are two types of policies. One is the external public council policies, which we bring to you and review on occasion and covers a plethora of things. Then there are internal operating guidelines, where I think we've used the word policy and internal operating guidelines interchangeably, where we need to be a little bit more tighter with our language around that. So the accommodation would be an internal operating guideline, because we don't, as far as I understand, we don't have a policy at the moment. But going back to your point, Councillor Bland, that's when I think we would issue the index. We would even bring the manual and circulate it. There's no secrets in the manual. It's just that they're procedural.
Understand that perhaps we could change some of the wording to
Yes.
guidelines rather than refer to policy as such, as with no.
I have a motion. I'm not far from putting it. Is there anyone else wish to move any amendment or changes or anything else?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to change the human resource implementation. Don't take it all out. Receive and note the report regarding the future implementation of a human resource manual and guidelines, as against policy, manual and guidelines.
Councillors Ling and
Agree. I'm happy with the change.
future, the word future's been inserted, and words and guidelines at the end of what was the original recommendation. Mover and seconder are happy with those two changes,
Yes.
variances. Does anyone else wish to speak to it again? If not,
Close.
close. Thank you, councillor. I'll put that slightly amended or varied motion. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Councillor Taylor.
Trilby Road construction.
Yeah, you want to swap with me? You are moving. I make the assumption you're moving the recommendation, councillor.
I'm moving the recommendation as written.
Item 1 and 12. Trilby Road upgrade budget for, so this is endorse the Trilby Road upgrade as it was described in the document for budget consideration 2021, and endorse the detailed design to be undertaken for that alongside the initial unit costs. That's, there a seconder?
Second.
Thank you, councillor Hill. Is there any debate around this as it comes out of committee?
Question?
Yeah. Councillor Bland.
So when you
yes.
say endorse a design, detailed design, be undertaken for the Trilby Road upgrade, there is no time frame on that. Are we talking 21, 22 and considering that, or are we expecting that to be done within this budget year?
I would take it, councillor, that this is put forward into the budget process we're in now. Nonetheless, even if it was or it wasn't, it would need to be designed. Anyway,
I
it's a
accept
pretty
that.
simple design, this one,
We can put in this year's budget.
but it can be put in this year's budget, and then you
So
have
the
the
clarity
opportunity
around
to
that is we
endorse it
have-
or remove it, councillor.
My question is that there money in this year's budget to do that?
Not yet, because this year's budget's not established,
No, not next year's.
No, you mean next
Current
year's?
as in the 21, 22.
No,
budget,
I'm
councillor.
talking about the design. You've indicated that we need to do that. We don't have a cost. what will be the cost and when will it be done, in which budget year?
And what would be the design costs of something of this nature?
Through Mr. Mayor, the design costs. To have that done. So
Thank you.
at the moment there is, it's not detailed in that motion, in that recommendation, sorry, that's 21, 22.
And that's my clarity. Thank you.
It's included, given the fact that it's talking about 21, 22, but it's not clear in there, so I might pay to see that up in the recommendation.
Please.
So you may, we can make, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we can do the design in the current financial year.
So if we indicate that in the dates, please, in point 2 with Councillor Taylor and Councillor Hill's permission. Be very clear when it's to be done.
Councillors, we're in a cycle at the moment. We haven't got a lot of fully pre-planned projects. In the last 18 months has been pretty frenetic. And so in terms of going forward in a council budget we're just assembling now for next year, we need to consider that we do have a budget line around design, because we are running out of projects to offer up if any other funding streams become available.
Master planning.
Master planning, as the CEO reminds me, but this is a relatively minor one, this one. How are we going with the rewording?
Yes.
Councillor Roundtree.
Some clarification. The area of land where Trilby Road goes through, and you've got George Mason Street on one side and Pangaringa Drive, is that council land in the middle there?
Yeah.
It is?
You've lost me. There's a piece
So
of land.
where Trilby Road runs through, looking at the picture, it's got section 1 and section 2, and there's like a block of blank land. Is that council land
That's right.
currently?
Do you know, Director, do you know the answer?
Through Mr. Mayor, the red and blue sections in the picture, that's council road reserve. To the left-hand side where you can see that sort of swampland, that's council reserve for our stormwater detention basin. The other areas are residential blocks. So the large section of land between the two roads, that's residential allotment.
So would there be, I noticed one of the reasons that this road should go in is so it gets the traffic off of the main thoroughfare through the residential area. Is there a plan to let that other side build up as a residential area and then be back in the same situation saying, well, do we want trucks going through the middle? Is that possible? Does that occur?
Well, public roadway, trucks up to 19 metres can travel it. The issue is probably the amenity of George Mason Drive, and that is the only way, to a degree, to get down to that end. It's probably a second level route out of that populated area. This debate's probably about Councillor Lang.
Sorry, I've been waiting and waiting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We don't have to tighten this room up. It's actually...
I'm just wondering how many farmers are we accommodating for here? It's residential area. And why can't these trucks use Pangaringa Road, which we went to the expense of bitumising not that long ago? Pangaringa Road runs right through. Why do we need to do another road in between George Mason and Pangaringa? Because we'll also need to look at upgrading the corner intersection with Ferry Road as well, I would say, to accommodate trucks.
So, Councillor, the questions around, is this for trucks? I think the word trucks is a bit loose here. So 19 metre
for
truck.
primary producers. How many primary producers are
I-
we doing this for?
Well, apparently there's one at the end that's shifting considerable amount of stock in and out. Now, what basis have I told that? I don't know. No, your point's valid, but I suppose it's around opening up that whole township area at the end of the day. Councillor Yanch, next.
Being that it is a township road, those blocks that face the red section particularly don't necessarily run through to the road that services Pangaringa. So those residents or those owners have a right to a frontage, irrespective of what is happening further out on the road. Yep, it's a surveyed road. We own it. Those residents, those owners have a right to access. And some of them may not have very good access at the moment without the road being done. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Well, I live near here
Yeah.
and I own land in, not any in either of these sections, but I do own land in the marina section itself. And numerous residents constantly talk to me about George Mason and the volume of traffic which uses it, which includes house building, water supply. For those who are building, they are currently using George Mason in order to access either the fingers of the marina or beyond. So anyone that's been down there can see that the road curls around at the end, and it can be quite difficult, you know, to navigate that road when you're delivering house materials. But in looking at the Trilby Road itself, fronts, where you can see section 1 and section 2, those lots are divided in such a way that those lots, certainly in section 1, have no access to a road. Whilst there is a road there, if they wanted to access that lot, they have to drive over the grass. And therefore, there's nothing, not to say that the people who purchased the land could have expected a fully functional road. Surely we can put a road in for them in order to access their land, in the hope that they will one day maybe build a house on that land. The other roads are accessible. So whilst some of them are gravel roads, and certainly there are still complaints about some of the gravel areas, they're in good condition. So I wouldn't necessarily say that every single road needs to be sealed. I'm a bit surprised anyway that Pangarinda was sealed, because it doesn't have very many properties off it. So that came as a surprise. I would have thought that Trilby, being more central, would have been the one which would have been sealed first. And if we are to get any development on Ferry Road, which I'm not aware that anything has gone through yet, that would be an ideal entryway then for people who wanted to go into the marina, who were accessing the back part of it, not necessarily those who are just accessing the fingers, which is the most developed. So if we're going to encourage growth in this marina, and we're going to encourage more development taking place, especially on the sections which are just not built on yet, because people can't get any housing materials down that section at all, then I think this is vital for the development of Wellington East.
Thank you. I'm very near to the end. Note that this does not commit council, it only commits it for budget consideration in the forthcoming budget. At least with a detailed design, we'll get it tightened. Figures up, Councillor Arthur, and I think we're nearly there.
I'd just like to, we know we've got a lot of roads that have got to be fixed up, and we've only got a certain amount of money. And when you sit down and work out what you're going to spend the money on, you've got to have facts and figures. So with the endorsement of the mover and seconder, I would like to move as put on the road counters to be put on those two roads for the next 3 months to find out what the actual traffic count is.
That's possible. Put the counters there, is that possible?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we can't put a counter on Weber Street because it's an unformed road. It's not a road. So it doesn't exist at the moment.
Goes in the sand dunes.
I think the council is
Someone's
actually
going to use
saying
it.
And George Mason.
George Mason Drive and Pangarinda Road near Ferry Road. I think that's what he's alluding to. Oh, correct.
Well, yeah.
That'd be
You've got to-
possible. Was my simple question. That would be-
Pangarinda and George Mason.
Yes, that's what I think he's alluding to. I don't think he's alluding to a track.
Yeah.
You'll have a question, councillor?
Through you, Mayor, didn't we just do that on George Mason?
No.
Didn't we have the counter on it, and didn't we get the numbers from it recently?
Over 2020, yes.
Yeah.
It might be that
Done.
Pangarinda might be useful, but that would be it. Councillor Roundtree, actually, you haven't
Very-
spoke, so.
Well, very quickly, I mean, it makes no difference what the counter said anyway. It's a road that needs to go in for people can access their land. It's a moot point. We just need to get on with it and do it, and it needs to be put in the budget.
Okay, I'm going to declare that everyone's had a go at it. Councillor Taylor is the closer then.
Close.
Close, thank you. So it is slightly amended from the agenda, I understand. Everyone's got it on the screen. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Try that again, actually. All those in favour? Those against? So it's carried 8-1 with councillor Ling being the one that voted against it. Please. Rest voted for it. Item.
Mr. Member, I move a motion regarding the counters to be put on there, so they go together.
So you'd like
Did it.
put the counters on George Mason Drive or Pangarinda Road at the entrance on the Ferry Road end.
Yeah, for, well, as soon as you can, for 2.5 months. minimum.
Technically possible, I'll ask. I won't work around.
Yes, yes, we can put them on the George Mason Drive and on Pangarinda for a period of
Concurrently.
currently at the same time.
Concurrently.
Through you, Mayor.
You want a motion for that or not? Or you agree to do it? So I won't forget.
You can have a motion, you're still on the subject, councillor. You're moving that way.
I'm guided by the CEO.
Well, we're discussing the relevance, but if you on them concurrently, that might produce a different result to what was previously on George Mason Drive separately.
Yeah, well, we've already got some, but yeah.
I think you're entitled to move a motion since we hadn't quite left the subject.
Okay,
I just look very keen on the next subject.
I'll move a motion that the Kent Road count has been put back on George Mason Drive and Pangaringa Road for a period of 2 months.
There a seconder? Councillor Qualman, you're seconding, I hope. Thank you. Is there any debate around that? Councillor Taylor?
Sorry, I think it's a complete waste of time.
Oh.
The reason I think it's a waste of time is that it was recently done for George Mason. George Mason has the most properties on it. Therefore, it's going to capture all of the traffic going up George Mason. And Pangarinda is going to capture the traffic that is using Pangarinda. It doesn't actually prove that the people using that road are the people that live there, or then go further and go to the houses that they live on, especially seeing it once Pangarinda doesn't actually go on, it might go, it could be a complete sealed road up to the top, but the houses off it are minimal, which means that people have to go off it onto an unsealed road in order to get down to the section where their house is. And the majority of them will use George Mason. So it's not going to provide anything different than the figures that we already have, which were put in October. And even then, that usage is partially for tourist accommodation, which is a large number of those properties, also which are on the marina fingers. So it's just going to capture the information that we already know. It's not going to do anything
Sounds to me like
different.
you're going to vote against this, councillor.
Yes.
I'll
Sorry,
go
I am.
to
I just think it's-
councillor Yates.
we already have the information.
I-
Why do we want it again?
Not my decision, councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I totally agree with councillor Taylor.
There you go.
Absolutely. It's a total waste of time, considering that the road we're talking about that needs to be done is a council obligation. It's a township road that is a sand dune that is difficult for people to access their properties. It really is that simple. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else wish to debate them? Right, I'm going to put the motion.
Can I just close?
No, yes.
As per the report, the alternate route will provide safe access for heavy vehicles, residential area and heavy vehicles. I would like to know how many heavy vehicles are actually use that road. There's one farm there. So,
Okay,
end of story.
you've closed debate, councillor.
Closed debate.
Thank you very much. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Just the motion is carried. It's carried with councillors, I'll go in the reverse, sorry, Anna, councillors Hill, Yench, Roundtree and Taylor voting against it. For it is councillors Arthur, Bowman, Ling, Bland and Simmons. Still carried. Okay. I'm going to try and move on to the next agenda item. Councillors, Granites Road. Question from councillor Bland before we start. Thank you.
That's in relation to point 2, same problem. Can we please put a date, year dates on this? So are we doing it within this year's budget? And if we are, can we actually indicate that
In the recommendation, it doesn't make it clear, councillor.
in the recommendation?
It says for 21-22 budget consideration.
And endorse a detailed design. Same problem as the previous one. Can we please put in there when we are endorsing it for to be done? Just for clarity.
Okay.
If
So,
it will be.
Councillors, the committee actually couldn't bring themselves to a decision on this one because we were a bit limited in numbers, and so this is why it's coming back here for a bit more discussion. Have I got a mover for the recommendation at all? Councillor Rountree, are you the mover of it as read?
With option 1 being, yep, endorse the option 1, yep.
Okay.
So I'm endorsing option 1.
So you're moving the recommendation with the 2 points as read in the agenda. Is there a seconder?
Question?
Question there.
Is there an option 2?
Yes, I think option 2 was to do a bigger remedial work, which is more expensive.
Fortunately, there is.
35.
Page 35, you're saying there's an option 2. Option.
79,000.
I'll second the motion, Mr. Mayor.
So councillor Ling has seconded the original motion, so it's moved
No.
down.
Arthur,
No.
Councillor Arthur.
Sorry, I've got 35.
You can get up at 5 o'clock, Brian.
So maybe, Mayor, it would be useful if James just outlined the two different motions.
Sarah here. Councillor Arthur is the seconder of the motion. You wish to speak now before we do that?
Yep. Well, I think we've had a good look at this. We've been out, everybody's had a look, and we've listened to an in-depth presentation by James, and I think even Councillor Qualman sort of was in a little bit against it because it's going to leave a bit of water on the road, but I don't find many roads where you haven't got water on the road, so. And that was the most simplest way of doing it.
Before I take councillors Taylor then Qualman, James, could you just give us a précis on what an option 2 is, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So
36 is the page I'm looking at,
I
councillors.
believe option 1's fairly clear and fairly straightforward. Option 2 is creating a pipe network around the back of the curb that would then discharge the water into the stormwater detention basin, which is basically in front of the RSL. We're on the corner of Granites Road, and I think it's Trevina there on that corner. So that's option 2. Option 1 is regrading of the existing water to allow the water to run across the surface of the road instead of under the surface of the road.
Councillors, relatively clear on page 36 of my agenda at least. Existing SEP, new box culvert and new head wall into the drainage basin. Council, I'll go with this, Councillor Taylor, and then Councillor Qualman.
Through you, Mayor. So my query on this was really, we're only given the recommendation is just for option 1. So whilst option 2 has been presented as an option, why is option 1, apart from cost, why is option 1 the recommended option? Is it just cost?
So that's the view of management, that's the suitable one, and because the committee could not make a decision,
So
been brought back to council as it would anyway.
what are the engineering implications for doing the cheaper version as opposed to doing what you would think would be a more extensive, longer lived second option?
And as James just to tell us that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the disadvantage of option 1 is you'd have water running across the surface of the road. In a heavy rain event, at the moment, the water runs down the northern curb line into a low point, into a side entry pit. And then from there, that water actually goes via a pipe network under the road. And then it comes back up onto the curb line on the southern side and flows away. The issue that we're having is because that culvert underneath the road is completely full of water, it has to be full of water for the water to do that that transition, and it leaks into the sub-base pavement of the road. Then we have this deforming of the road, and for those of you who've driven over it, you would have seen that it keeps rutting and shoving in the wheel path. So the way to get rid of it is to stop the water penetrating the base of the road pavement. So we need to get rid of that culvert that's underneath. So option one is basically regrading the road. Instead of having a grade like this, where the water goes to either curb, it has a single flat grade where all the water will run to the southern side of the road, and therefore it doesn't need to go on a pipe underneath the road, or it doesn't need to go in a pipe around the back of the curb into the stormwater detention basin, because it's all flowing to the southern side or to the river side of the road, if that makes sense.
To which side of the road, sorry?
To the southern side or the
western side,
The church side?
church side.
Church side.
Correct. So yeah. Yep.
Councillor, this is really a question about how much water from that drainage pattern you saw on the original part of the agenda you're prepared to accept going across that road in a heavy rainfall event versus diverting it via a side entry pit and trenching and other services and several other issues. That's why you see a difference in estimated costing between 45 and 79,000.
So what is the current capture?
It captures on page, I hope you got the same agenda as me. Yep. Page 32, an area back up First Avenue towards the Lutheran Church. I think it's about where the apex line of the drainage is off that street.
Yeah, but that doesn't sort of indicate whether it floods or whether it clears. Does it flood or does the water clear?
At the moment, the water clears from the area, but the issue is the depth of road material under this wet culvert.
So the water at the moment is clearing, but it's infiltrating into the base of the road, which is causing those shoving and rutting issues, because the rubble underneath the pavement, underneath the asphalt, is soft and wet basically. So we need to stop the water getting into that to fix the issues. And the way to do that is either bring it across the surface, or it goes from the northern side and it goes around the back of the curb and into the stormwater detention basin.
So now that you, the recommendation is to accept an option which now keeps the water on the surface. So the question then is, will that water which is now on the surface cause flooding? Whereas the second option, I understand it would be channeled away into a drain, so less likely to cause flooding.
But through you, Mr. Mayor, I suppose it's to determine on whether you're talking about flooding as in pooling water or flooding as in there will be water transitioning across the surface of the road. Yes, there will be.
Under both options?
No.
With option two, there will only be the water that is collected on the road will run to the gutter line over the single section of the road. In option one, the whole entire section of the road will run across.
Almost like a swale effect.
Almost like you see at an intersection with a spoon drain. It's basically a spoon drain that is spread out over 5 metres to make it really shallow and really non-aggressive when you enter in and out of it, basically.
So Mike?
So no. So how are you going, councillor?
No, I'm worried that when we have major rainfall events in Tailem Bend, we have major rainfall events.
Which is why I suppose a second proposal, and there's a photo's been circulated, I think, that shows, but I think it might have been when we were building the two bits of road. Councillor Qualman, Councillor Yench, and then Councillor Bland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd actually like to move an amendment. The recommendation then to endorse option 2, and the second point 2 changed in brackets for option 2, please. On the grounds that I have great concerns about 15, 16 feet of water running across the road. And I think the option 2 offers a better way to dispose of any flooding issues, concerns.
Thank you. So you would just simply change them to option 2 instead of option 1.
Right.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Taylor. Given you've spoken a bit, I'll give you a chance to separate. Councillor Yench, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand option one and I see the merits, but knowing the history of the area there, I don't believe it will be successful in a storm event. We haven't had a significant storm event in Tailem Bend for over 20 years. When we do get them, a surface running area of that size, I believe the Methodist Church will be inundated. I think it has to go back underground, and then whatever's left on the surface that doesn't go down the drain will act as a backup to get the stormwater event away. I appreciate where we're going from a financial point of view, but unfortunately, this is a historic problem that very few of us in this chamber, other than Councillor Cormann and myself, would have seen significant flooding in Tailem Bend in the past. It will occur again. It's not a matter when, or it will never. It will. The Methodist Church area, that corner, has always been a problem. And I believe the last time we had a significant event, the common effluent pumps that are in that stormwater retention area in that vicinity flooded, and the electricals gave out, and as a consequence they had to be raised above what they considered was the flood aspects at that time. So yes, when it comes, it's going to give everyone a hell of a shock. So option two is the only option. Thank you.
I think I'd you next, Councillor Bland, and then Councillor Ling, or
For
an amendment.
Through you, Mr Mayor. I guess my point was, I don't see, in comparison to both of those, other than a financial issue here, no discussion about risk or risk assessment on that, of which I'm hearing in this room from councillors. And I think that's missing from this. I'm not saying that the cost isn't considerably more, but just basically on the risk and of flooding into that sizable area, then I will be looking at option two.
Okay, Councillor Ling.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with the second option. You can't have water running across a road, particularly on a corner. I'm not too sure if Granite's Road is 50 or 60k. Either or, you can't have people cornering across a stream of water. It causes aquaplaning, the vehicle will lose control and end up in the church itself. So water across the road is not an option, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, who else? Councillor Arthur.
Just a quick question to James. The Mayor and I did go out and have a look at this when it was first brought up, and I thought option two was the way to go. But after talking to James, who knows a bit about designing these things, probably a little bit more than we do, I changed my mind. The question is, James, how much water in a normal rainfall will be running over this road?
Through you, Mr Mayor. So any stormwater drainage is designed in accordance with the average rain event. So everything from a road perspective in stormwater is designed to either a 1 in 5 year rain event or a 1 in 10 year rain event. So the rain event Councillor Inch is talking about, even in option two, wouldn't be designed for. We don't design for a 1 in 20 or 50 year rain event when we're designing for roads and flooding. So anything that we're designing for would be a 1 in 5 or a 1 in 10 year event. Basically, that's because if you look at a road profile, the height of your curb on one side is designed to contain about a 1 in 10 year worth of water. Anything more than a 1 in 10 year road event is going to flood over that curb into the footpath, into the neighbouring properties anyway. So if your stormwater network is coping with a 1 in 50 year event, you're not actually getting that water into it, because anything above a 1 in 10 year event is flooding into the properties anyway and not being captured into your stormwater network. So I can certainly have a look at what a 1 in 10 year rain event is here and the catchment area, and that would give us an understanding of whether we're talking about a sheet of water that's 2 millimetres thick or a sheet of water that's 20 millimetres thick. Without doing the research, my sort of gut feel is we're probably in a 1 in 10 year rain event, we're probably talking a 10 millimetre sheet of water during a heavy rain event.
Because most towns, if you get a very heavy rain event, they flood. I remember boats down Tindanara in the main street from the old Dalgetty's building across the Candy Canvas through, because it's just not built to take it. But I just want to know, because I just weren't sure we're going to have that much water running over the road all the time, or normal, or we're going to have that much water.
Councillor Taylor, I hope you got a question because you're the second to this.
Railway Terrace, it did flood a couple of years ago, because we know people that live on it. So down the bakery end, there was flooding, and you can't predict when you're going to have heavy rainfall. And my concern is this corner. It's not just it's a main route, Granite's Road, to the silos and to further up towards Karoonda. It's a main road. It carries heavy traffic. Therefore, my question is, why would you include an option, with due respect to James, why would you include an option which has water running across the road?
So councillors, I take your point, but you're arguing about how much water in what rain events. I take that. I suppose staff have put up what they think is the most realistic option with the most realistic money. It was brought back to council because committee could not make a decision. I think we've nearly exhausted debate, to be quite honest. Unless there's anyone that hasn't, and Councillor Bland will have a question, I trust.
I do have a question in that, could we actually add a point 3 in that there is that to have a rider on this option 2, which I support, but I do agree that we need a little bit more information to validate what we're saying. And that is that we need to have some information about the 10-year rainfall that James has already indicated, and that needs to be documented and going in here. Because I think from what Councillor Taylor was saying, and that it is on a corner, it is a high use area, it is not good, motorcycle, whatever comes around there. I don't want to be the person who took the cheap option purely because it was a cheap option. And that's what this report basically says.
Okay. I think the words detailed design will cover your queries, councillor. I think I'm at the end of my debating ability.
I'd like to think that would come in the detailed design.
I really like to think, I do think.
Detailed design.
Quickly, what, James?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, do we proceed to detailed design irrespective of what option it is and let a professional decide what the recommended outcome of that situation is?
Not. How long's a piece of string in dollar terms? Sorry, James. Take that back.
And sorry, Mayor, with all due respect, councillors, James would have already done the risk assessment, and we didn't put up option 1 just because it was the cheapest option. In his professional opinion, it's probably the one that would be fit for purpose for what we need to do there.
Anyway, I've got an amendment, so I'm going to have to run with that at this stage. So I don't look. Councillor Kwong will close the debate on the amendment.
I'll close the debate on the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So I'm going to put the amendment, which is option 2, councillors, at this stage. Excuse me. All those in favour of the amendment? So. Those against? Carried 8 votes to 1, with Councillor Arthur being the thing. That becomes the motion. Any further amendment? There's no further amendment. I'll put it as the motion. Those in favour? Those against? It's carried once again, 8 votes to 1, with Councillor Arthur being the councillor voting against it. That's not carried unanimously. Sorry, welcome, David. Sorry, we're going to be a while. All right. Councillor, so I've completed item 2, I think. Sorry, councillors. Councillor Rountree, you're on number 3, I hope.
I am. I wanted to take that recommendation and turn it into a motion.
Well, that's what happens when you move.
That's what I'd like to do then, thank you. But I'm changing it slightly in that I want the council to consider replacing the Tail and Bend Playground boundary fence as part of the 22-23 financial year, and that further costs around the removal and replacement of the concrete plinth be investigated, because I think we need those numbers as well. But it's pushing it out 1 year. I think reading the report, it indicates that some of those areas will last another year.
Second that.
We're just getting this right, but I have got, Councillor Ling, you've indicated you've seconded it. So just get this right on the screen because, sorry Ash, I'm under pressure there. Have you presented it to the,
No, but I
because
can.
we've got a bit of mix up. Just hold us, councillors. Councillors, we're scheduled for a workshop at 5:30, but I think at this stage, we have a confidential item to deal with and other things yet. I seek your views on what we should do. David, if you've got a particular time frame, you must be out of this. No?
I can accommodate you. Aren't we connected here?
So my view is that perhaps after this, we have a short break, 5 or 10 minutes, and then we come back and complete the agenda. And then we will have our workshop around rating review. Is that roughly we want to be, councillors? Or we just sort out the one we're on? I take that as a yes. Sorry, we're just tidying this up because that's quite substantively different to the recommendation.
Councillors, I was just checking to make sure that with James that there's no safety issues that delaying it would cause, and there is none. This is about the replacement because it's now time to do that. But there are no significant safety issues that are immediate.
So we believe that the initial cost estimates for the fencing per se was accurate and probably surprised some of us at the time. But probably the concrete basis was a bit more of an interesting debate. I think that's where we ended up in the committee. Councillor Taylor, I'm not in debate, so I hope you got a question.
Question, Mayor, would it not be worth waiting until we've got an idea of what's happening with the CFS shed and also thinking about the potential for an extra toilet within the playground and turning this into a much bigger project if there are no safety issues around the current fence?
That's up to council. At this stage, we're awaiting a report around PFAS in terms of the now disused CFS station. I understand it'll be returned to us, all other things being equal.
I'll ask you a question.
I'm still on a question.
Of the CEO. Why would we want it back?
That's exactly the question I asked, councillor, which is why
Something more to rental.
why before we even considered that, we needed the CFS to make good. Part of that make good was the condition around the issue around the PFAS. So they're still in the process of looking at that. We haven't, but.
So Ling just left the room, sorry. Yeah, councillor, it's a worthy question. And so people, as I understand it, the toilets on the ex-CFS station at Tailem Bend are not hooked to the CED. Are not.
Mm-hmm.
That helps anyone's debate process.
Correct.
Thank you, councillor Yance. I think I heard you there. Yeah, that's just, I take your point, councillor Taylor. I suppose this motion allows a bit more time for thinking about it. What will be the motion? How are we going? Council consider replacing the Tailem Bend Train playground boundary fence as part of the 2022-23 financial year, and further costs around the removal and replacement of concrete plinth investigated. I haven't got a seconder. Councillor Qualman. Councillor Bland was waving too, so. No, it doesn't matter because Councillor Ling was it. Just left the room though. Right, any debate around what is now the motion in front of you? Councillor Qualman, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, it's just a comment that the reason I totally agree what the council Roundtree has moved is that putting it back one more year, so to speak, gives us time to work out the cost. And good to see we've got about the removal and replacement of the concrete cliff because we weren't quite up with until the mayor did mention about that. Now we've been made aware of those consequences financially. And the CEO and James have indicated that it will probably last another 2 years safely. We haven't got any immediate safety issues. So that's why I'm supportive of the new motion, please.
Thank you. Councillors, probably 18 months ago, I had I won't call it a deputation, a posse, I'd call it, of Ballymena primary school children, and after they understood that we don't fund the hospital, this was their next highest priority, was the fence around the playground. So, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just when I looked at this, it's 3/4 of the boundary fence is powder coated and the back is cyclone. I wonder if it should read the entire boundary fence. Get my drift?
Well, I understand at the time in the committee, it was the entire 4 sides.
All right, okay, just clarifying.
That was my understanding of the process.
That's all right.
Okay, I've got Councillor Roundtree and Councillor Leng have moved and seconded the thing, what you see on the screen. Is there any further debate around that?
Yes, you've got councillor Coleman up there seconding.
You're right, we still have. You snuck out on me, councillor, and
I couldn't wait.
no, I'm trying to. All right, that's correct. Anyone else, councillor? Close, please, councillor Roundtree.
Closed.
Thank you. I put the motion as it reads. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. So I think we finished that part. I might just say petitions. We have nil item 13, 14. We have no deputations. And 14.1, we have, as I understand it, no public here for question time. So we'll resume in 5:20, please, for the last item on the agenda.
Last one.
confidence. We've got information document, councillors. Councillor Yentz, you in the information document.
I would like to declare an interest in the next item.
In the information document.
No,
Just wait on.
you beat me.
Now, I know, well, information document on councillor
Councillor who?
Start with councillor Bland, then councillor Roundtree, then councillor Taylor. Yes. Information document,
Okay.
councillors, under a separate cover.
With regards to the extension of time requested, has Oz Industry granted this extension yet?
In relation to what?
To the
Yeah.
grant funding, the projects?
We've written and asked for an extension. We've been checking with them. They haven't as yet, but it's not because of anything that they're concerned about. They just have a backlog.
So my next question then says, with regards to the Peak Netball Club, did council carry out a site inspection in January, and is there a further update on how that is progressing?
David, I can't give you an exact update. Peter Bond has been keeping an eye on it. Extensive work have been done. We can bring back to you exactly where they're up to with that.
And then thirdly, what are the options for Canalpin Pool and Wadmore House should an extension not be approved? Can council purchase goods ahead of time to at least expend some of the money?
Through Mayor, I don't think it's a risk that the extension won't be.
Okay.
And the advice from the Commonwealth is that we can continue and be ready. So it's safe for the fence that we're ready to go when things are, but they've also given us advice of don't delay. So we're just sort of trying to have that fine line of not being too exposed, but continuing to do what we can.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bland, are you ready?
I am. And Mr. Mayor, this is in relation to the Meningie North Jetty. I have a note supporting council's work on that, and I'd like to take the opportunity to read that out here from Jock Vanstra.
Jock Vanstra, right, yep.
And Jock visited with his tourist boat recently, unfortunately at last minute, and didn't really give a lot of time. Council staff did attend at very short notice and took a little trip with him back through the Narrows. Thanks for calling down to see us at our first visit to Meningie's brand new destination jetty. The facility is perfect for my boat and other similar sized vessel. The facility is a credit to your council. It is something that was badly needed for us and for any visiting vessels, and there is a buzz around Goolwa with people now planning to visit to a new destination. They've started planning an overnight trip, staying at the local motel and having dinner at the pub. Please convey our appreciation to council for an excellent piece of infrastructure. Regard, Jock Vanstra.
Very good.
Spirit of the Coorong.
That's your only item, councillor?
No, in relation to the jetty, we can talk about that under infrastructure. We'll check with James.
Few loose planks, yes, we're aware.
Sorry?
Few loose planks.
Few.
Few.
We'll go with quite a few that are in our budget to be replaced. I suggest we do it. The walking frames were very dangerously
No.
loose.
It's a separate project to the one that was funded. That's the reason.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Taylor.
Through you, Mayor, to the CEO. January 27th, meeting with Raylene Thomas, unique animals display. What more can you say about that?
So I met with the folks from the Unique Animals just after I'd started, and we talked about they wanted some new signage. So they've provided that signage and now really just wanted to come back to us and say, can you help us position it or give us some support in how we put that signage up? So that was about it.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through the chair to the CEO. CEO report, page 49, council external funded projects, $140,000 upgrade, Hill Street, Tailem Bend. Bit of an update with that, please.
Sorry, councillor.
It's about the Hill Street upgrade, which is in COVID 2 or 1? 2, I think you're right, yeah.
Sorry, and you, councillor, a question about when we haven't started that yet. James, the contract has been left?
Yeah, so through Mr. Mayor, the contract for the works is being done and detailed design is underway.
Thank you.
Councillor Bland, yes.
Question in relation to the Canalpin Hall upgrades there. Can you just remind me, I thought we were doing something with tables as well, and I may have misinterpreted where we do.
So I can answer that, Mayor.
And start you on tables? I just,
Tables have been ordered.
okay, so it's not in this budget? Do we have a price?
I think in the motion that went to council, it was up to $10,000.
So, okay, thank you.
Councillor Hill.
Just in relation to the photograph of the dead carp.
Yeah.
Was that all one group of carp? Maybe someone had been fishing or something, or was it spread out and then put together? Was it just one location?
I don't know, so I don't know who submitted it. No,
7. It says that under the
common
picture, Rick
site.
Dixon Reserve, total, and then it's got dead carp dumped at Wellington East.
Good 2000.
They look like
Facilities
they've been
team.
placed there for the photo.
The question is, do we know who dumped it?
Do we know what it was in relation to? Was it a fishing competition, or was it just people found them in the marina, or?
We'll have to find out more about that. I'm sorry, I don't know.
We can look at the virus out.
In regard, not necessarily in regard to that, but there was a large bus fishing group, a fishing club, who fished Lake Albert only a couple of weeks ago, and I know that they actually take home all of their carp. This is the exact reason why I raised a motion some time ago for council to do something about carp being dumped.
Let's find out who the,
We may not know. Mayor.
well, exactly, but let's find out, see if we can find out if they've got any envelopes with them.
And it probably falls into that illegal dumping. It's just a particular type. And I think the community facilities team are just trying to demonstrate the diversity of the things that they actually go and attend to from time to time.
It's a credit, I must say, for the staff having to clean that up. If that had been let go for a few days, you wouldn't want to go near it with a barge pole. It's shocking.
It's an issue right along.
Any other questions out of the information document?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you to the CEO or maybe to James. The solar update, an engineer's report have been provided for the roof, the Meningie Information Hub, and they're still getting one from Taliban. What sort of dollars are we looking at here for the remediation work? And has the budget blown out because of that?
We do have the answer to that. It hasn't blown out. It just needed some work.
Don't send them this way.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so we had an engineer's report that's identified that some work needs to be done. We're getting a design done, which is a strengthening of the truss, so we don't know how much it's going. We're getting a design done on what works need to be done to strengthen the trusses first.
Yeah, that's right.
Then we'll be
I'll
able to
work
cost
that
it
out,
out.
yeah. I just wondered about the cost because it's not going to be cheap when you're working around with
Is that-
trusses in the roof.
At the moment, they've only identified that the existing trusses are insufficient. We don't have the design for the new truss or the modifications yet.
And the other thing is, just as a matter of interest, what's the final design for the toilets at Taylor and Bend that's being quoted and going to be built?
That's who you mean.
Just for interest. So,
As determined by the councillors at that last meeting when you decided on the design.
which design was that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's the design without the service duct at the rear, but it has the communal hand basins and the individual hand basins. They were the two items of major discussion. So it doesn't have the service duct at the back, but it does have a basin in every cubicle plus the basins out the front. And it looks exactly like the image in the info doc is a 3D render of the building.
So what were the extra design costs and the extra costs to implement that? And don't say it was nothing because that's not, it wouldn't be a fact.
So I don't know the additional cost for the hand basins off the top of my head.
We'll get that to you.
That was the only additional cost from the discussions with council was the implementation of individual hand basins in every toilet.
Ensuring the floor was
Can we be informed of that? Because it would be a significant cost. I've talked to plumbers about it and they just cannot believe the extra cost will be in it. Because you will have to redesign the toilets. You just can't whack them in there. So there had to be redesigned somewhere along the line. Well, you just can't have a cubicle there and go and put a hand basin in it.
through you, Mr. Mayor, the cubicle is designed to have a hand basin in it to begin with. It's a modular section that would have a hand basin in it. Originally, we removed the hand basin because we had the communal hand basin. So we're simply putting the hand basin back in where it originally would
Never
be.
knew that.
You learn something every day, councillor.
You do, yeah.
You finished though.
Yes.
Councillor Taylor, questions?
Through you, Mayor, on the back of that, regarding the tail and bend toilets, was there ever any progress or discussion regarding the artistic panels?
So we did track it down. We haven't progressed that as yet, as far as I know, but we have tracked down where. And no, we have not done anything more.
Okay.
Anything else, councillors? Councillor Bland?
Yes, I'd just like to query the visitor numbers at the Meningie Info Hub, but particularly around how often we were open this year during that period of time, and were staff in attendance full time, or were in fact, because the numbers are down. I mean, one would anticipate some drop, but are they down because we didn't have enough staff with people off on leave?
I think, Mayor, through you, we didn't open as much during the public holidays because we didn't have volunteers. So, and I'm guessing here, but last Christmas we would have had more opening days during those public holidays than we did this year.
So
We directed people, so I'm guessing that's the case, but we can do a bit more research into that.
I just would like to know whether it is because we actually weren't open either with volunteers or with staff, or the hours were shortened, because the town itself appears to be a lot busier, and I'm a little bit surprised that we're down as much.
We will have a look. We'll check that out.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, there is no more. We move to item 16, confidential Ready to go. Thank you, councillors. Welcome back, councillor Yench. There being no further business on the agenda, I'll declare the meeting closed at 6:25. Thank you. Now, we're staying for a workshop.